Now we have a romance novel, and I could not be happier. Their hips gyrated in a smooth rhythm. Repeat. Their hips gyrated in a smooth rhythm. Those are not my words. Those are his words. Who? The prophet Chad Daybell. As you know, Chad Daybell, now implicated in so many deaths. I've had to make a flow chart to write them all down. We're talking about cult mom Lori Vallow because two of the dead people are her children. One, Tylee Ryan's murder. There's nothing left of her but a bucket of rendered flesh. That's all that's left of this cute teen girl. J.J. Vallow, cult mom Lori Vallow's 7-year-old son with learning disabilities. Then you have Tammy Daybell, who died at a young age, healthy as a horse, was competing in a marathon, died in her sleep, according to the prophet Chad Daybell. He couldn't wait to hop in the sack with cult mom Lori Vallow, so his wife Tammy had to go. So there's J.J., Tylee, Tammy. There's Charles Vallow, that's cult mom Lori Vallow's husband. He was shot dead by cult mom Lori Vallow and her brother, Alex Cox. And there's another body floating around out there. Joseph Ryan. That's cult mom Lori Vallow's, I think, third husband. By the time his body was found, he was too decomposed to really get a good COD. But she always put it out there that it was a heart attack. Right. Now we have a romance novel, and I could not be happier. So this is a romance novel written by the prophet, I have to put in the quoties, Chad Daybell. He wrote for his future wife, Lori Vallow. They were hooking up all over town in motels and hotels before the pair were accused of murdering her two children and their former spouses. Both of them, Tammy Daybell and Charles Vallow. 4 dead bodies. Daybell sends the messages in the form of a romance novel about the two of them, but he gave them monikers, James and Elena. Now, wait a minute. Wasn't there another name, Jackie, an even more exotic name? What was it? Several. Anyway, joining me right now, high-profile lawyer out of Jacksonville, Dale Carson, former Fed, an agent with the FBI, author of Arrest Proof Yourself. Dale, I can only hope and pray that somehow, some way, and I've got to think of a way that this is evidentiary, that it is probative, in other words, that it proves something to do with these murders, because this jury has got to read this. I think I have a way, Dale Carson. Here's the way I try to get it in first. That this romance novel, their hips gyrated in a smooth rhythm, and I've got a lot more toe-curling eroticisms by the prophet Chad Daybell. This novel was written before the murders for his future wife, which shows his preoccupation and fixation on sex with cult mom Lori Vallow before his wife was murdered. That's how I would get it in.
Right, and apparently they used those monikers in a variety of other texts post-mortem to the individuals who died.
You mean James and Elena? James and Elena, the two that were getting it on? That's it. Raphael and Lily. Not the traditional spelling, of course. It can't be Lily. It's got to be with an I. Probably with a heart instead of a dot over the I. I've got to write that down. Raphael and Lily. Okay, now I've got James and Elena. So, this is off of their cell phones. Could anything be more damning unless they had a to-do list or a grocery list of how to commit murders from Home Depot or Lowe's? What do you make of it?
Well, that method of seduction has been long tried. I mean, Lord Byron.
I did not expect that coming out of your mouth.
You know,
Are you
and
daring to
apparently pretty
compare this
effective.
piece of BS, technical legal term, to Lord Byron? Really? Did you actually just say that?
Well.
Why don't you
It
just
doesn't
compare
have.
him to Shakespeare? Why don't you just torch my whole 18th century literature book? Why don't you just throw it out in the trash? How dare you compare
Well,
this
it's
to Lord
certainly
Byron?
not.
Have you lost your mind? What did
It's
you
not
what
at
was your
the level of
major in college? I'm just curious.
creative writing and English lit.
I don't believe that for 1 minute, because you would never have compared their hips. What did it say about their hips? Their hips gyrated in a smooth rhythm.
Well,
Well,
they didn't
but
write it. Byron didn't write it that way exactly, and he
no.
was way more effective.
Okay, go ahead. How can the state use this? How can it become probative?
I just merely am mentioning the fact that the lure of sensuality written down is the subject of most romance novels, and that begins with Byron, from my perspective.
I guess you're going to go all the way back to David and Bathsheba.
Well, there it
Right.
is. You know, that
Yeah.
drives the problems, and of course, you look at this. I mean, these people are living on a different planet when they get into this cult of beliefs that they somehow are connected previously to the Christ. I mean, it's just appalling. But people get in these cult-like behaviors, and they reinforce themselves when they get around other people who seem to believe as they do, and that's what causes the problem. And it's like gangs, criminal gangs. I mean, it's the same mechanism of operation. When you join a gang, you join a cult, and of course, this is part of the method that he used. I'm talking about Daybell here, to lure her deeper into the process that he invented.
Hold
Pretty
on just a
frightening.
moment. It's not just about having steamy sex, but the cringe-inducing texts tell the story of a couple who meet at a book conference, but who were married, wait for it, in a previous life. I just love that so much.
Well, they were closely related to, and in his writing, they were closely related to Jesus Christ.
Will you
I mean,
please
it's
quit
appalling.
dragging him into this? He does not want to be part of this novel. Okay, wait. I'm quoting. James took her in his arms and they smiled at each other. The vibration in the room was intense. Their hearts reached out to each other in glorious reunion. I hope my children never hear this. James gently touched the sides of Elena's breasts, and he was in ecstasy. She stood on her tiptoes and gave him a sensual kiss that sent electricity throughout his body. I don't know
Did
if
it
I can even
entangle?
read the rest of this. They moved quickly toward the bed and were quickly entwined around each other. She was so beautiful, loving, and enchanting. James could hardly breathe. They were both aroused, but knew there were limitations on what could occur. They kissed nearly an hour and pressed against each other tightly. I think a lot more was going on in those local motels. They were not just pressing against each other tightly and bound in ecstasy. Can we talk about the spiritual connection? Quote, before this life. That was actually one of his pickup lines.
Right.
Hey, we were
It
married
was.
in a previous life, so we've already had sex, so this is really no big deal.
You brought that out previously, Nancy,
Yes,
and
I
that
did,
is
and you never really commented on it. I think you wrote
well,
it down.
I am now, and it's certainly obviously it's effective, at least for what Vallow. Bless you.
What's probative about this which is where I started, is that many of these texts were sent from the prophet Chad Daybell to cult mom Lori Vallow July 13, 2 days after Vallow's fourth husband Charles was shot dead by Vallow and her brother, and before his wife Tammy Daybell was murdered. Do you see the timing is very critical, because he's still married at this time. This was, what did I just tell you? Sent July 13, 2019. July 13, 2019. It was October 19 let's see, July, August, September, October. 3 months later to the day, October 19, that Tammy Daybell died in her sleep, not of a heart attack, but of asphyxiation. Now, can we talk about the probative nature of this romance novel, dare I call it that? And if you say Lord Byron one more time, or don't even say Shakespeare, do not. I'm going to have to cut your mic. That's all I can do from here.
Clearly, it's admissible. I mean, there's little doubt that the court would allow that evidence to be presented to court. They've also allowed, other jail phone calls, which it always stuns me that people who are in custody, my clients, have to be told repeatedly that all phone calls from jails are recorded and in the back of squad cars. But people love to talk. And you can't talk with somebody else without revealing certain points that the government, and in this case the state, can use against you to prosecute you. But people really do talk to one another and discuss information that certainly defense attorneys want to keep out of the ears of the prosecutor. But they don't seem, when they're living in a different reality as these people are, they seem immune to the realities of the world, that you may have been anointed to perform this way, but you've got to pay Caesar, and that's what she's going to do ultimately, because the circumstantial evidence against her, and perhaps Daybell as well, is pretty dang strong.
This book that, and I'm calling it a book, but it's we have it encapsulated in a series of texts. Have you noticed when people are lying, and I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of liars, either your clients or somebody you cross-examined on the stand, they weave in a grain of truth, a little bit of truth into their big fat lie. I guess so they can keep it straight in their heads. Because I'm looking at this novel, and of course he's James, Daybell is James, and Cult Mom is Elena. James was the first speaker on Saturday morning and knew exactly where Elena would be sitting. He made sure to mention the scene from his book that they had discussed the previous evening. He was smitten by her and was even nervous that she would think of his talk, what she would think of his talk as they spoke. But when he glanced at her, she was always attentive and watching him. After the talk, he went to his book table. There was a group gathered there. His heart leapt out of his chest when Elena joined and helped to sell the books. She was so beautiful he could hardly concentrate on customers. I'm not enjoying rereading his novella, but I guarantee you that either that exactly happened or something like that happened in real life. He's taken a little grain of truth and creating this fantasy novel. He's telling their sex story through this novel. Do you see that, Del Carson?
Oh, absolutely, I do. And you asked a question about liars. One of the things that, and you would know this, Nancy, is the details get shallow. So when you interview people, you want to go down to the very, very smallest detail. What were you wearing? What were the other people wearing? Those kinds of things can't be instantly fabricated. And if you go back over it, they change. So if you take a break or you readjust the conversation to another point and come back to that, all those things change because people have to fabricate it. But when things really happen, they get buried in the memory in a way that it doesn't require any brief interval to talk about it, and the specifics remain constant.
James was definitely having amorous feelings toward Elena as they sold books. He had not felt this happy in his entire life. You know what? If I had been Tammy Daybell, I would have kicked his rear end. She is married to him all these years. She stands by him through all of his BS and all of his 25 books that he has published. They're all BS, by the way. And gives birth to his children, cooks for him, does his laundry, takes care of his home. And now he says he had not felt this happy in his entire life? To HELL with him? Man, I would send him straight to Lori Vallow, COD, cash on delivery, no returns. He's yours now. You keep him. You wash his clothes. You cook his dinner. You clean his house and take care of his children. I've had it. Hasn't been this happy in his whole life. If David Lynch jumps up and ever says, I've met someone, I haven't been so happy in my whole life. You know what? I swear I would never have anything to do with a gun other than training as an assistant district attorney. But I would be very, very tempted. Listen, her eyes had mesmerized him from the moment they met. But once the book sales slowed down, she stood near him. They looked deeply into each other's eyes. Of course, that's got to happen. And he knew he was in the presence of a goddess.
A goddess.
Do you remember? He calls everyone within his group that's doing his dirty work a goddess. He had her convinced she was a goddess that was meant to destroy zombies to lead true believers to Christ. And here's that phraseology. She's a goddess.
Well, look, here's the thing that confuses me. He didn't force her to kill her own children. Those are things that individuals do, and they are personally responsible for that behavior. Now, yeah, he may have been an influence, and it may have been an excuse, but clearly there was something deeply wrong with Vallow to begin with. Otherwise, she would have never ended up in this circumstance.
Okay, what are you even talking about? Something wrong with her? That is not a medical diagnosis, number one. They don't have the insanity defense in Idaho. So it doesn't even matter what you're saying right now. You might as well yell it out the car window. But number two, she's not insane. She helped commit these murders, then she lied about it and covered her tracks and flew to Hawaii and got married. She knows exactly what she's doing. Didn't you hear those phone calls with her son, Colby, that were played in court in front of the jury? He kept going, Mom, what happened? Why did this happen? She lied through her teeth. As soon as she had Charles Vallow, her prior husband, murdered, she immediately told Colby, oh, he died of a heart attack. She already had a lie formulated. She is not insane, Del Carson.
Agreed. No, I agree with that. She's not insane. But what about the marriage and why the woman, Tammy, stayed is because of what I consider a normalcy bias. We all believe that things can't be that bad in our world. So everything's normal. And then when something extraordinary happens like this, where your husband runs off with some other woman, you just go, that can't possibly really have happened. So you stay in the same mode and you don't react to it quickly because you can't believe that it's happening to you.
The erotic tension continued throughout the afternoon. The thought of Chad Daybell and eroticism in my mind is just like a jumble. James, a.k.a. Chad Daybell, could only think of her. His desire was indescribable. Thankfully, she had worn 16 layers of clothing to survive the weather, so he was not fully aware that she truly had the body of a goddess. Her dimensions were exactly what he always fantasized about. Wait. He once again had to fight off a powerful urge to kiss her and somehow disguise the massive erection he was experiencing. What if Tammy Daybell had read this and about his massive erection? Well, maybe she did read it, Jackie. Maybe she did read it. Maybe that's why she had to be asphyxiated or smothered in her sleep. Did you ever think about that? What if she got a gander at this?
Well, there's no question law enforcement found it. She could have very easily found it if she had any suspicions at all, which individuals who think their spouse is cheating often have preliminary ideas, and they just normalize them when they shouldn't be normalized. So that's no doubt what one of the potential consequences is. The person sleeping right next to you. And it's really easy to run a knife into you or put a pillow over your face. So, that's dangerous when people end up in those circumstances.
Can I get your cell number in case I have questions? In other words, can I get your cell phone in case I have another erection? That's what he's trying to say. Quote, he was already madly in love. I mean, this jury is going to fall out when they hear this novel.
Well, that's right. And the intertangled tongues is, as I just was tangled-tongued, you know?
It
That's
goes
one of
on
his-
and on and on. Explain to our listeners why this novel, this romance novel, is important for the jury to see.
Well, it shows a predisposition, and it definitely shows an entanglement with a woman outside the bounds of marriage, and that can clearly be a motive for eliminating the obstacles for them to be together.
You know, I just think women and men see things differently. I'm not sure about that, but, you know, when I look at my husband, to me, he looks just like he did when we met. He hasn't changed a bit. And I think of all the wonderful things he does, like he took John David to the doctor this morning. You know, John David got a concussion. And I went, of course, but he brought him back home because I had to come to work. And he, you know, helps me with my mother. He's always there. I rely on him. Why do people forget what real love is?
Well, it's service, clearly, right? It's being of service to one another, because the combination, the synergy, is what magnifies the power of your family and your abilities. Someone takes care of certain things in the household that you don't have to, so that you can be stronger or better at your profession. That is a servant, and that is a positive thing. And we do that for one another in good marriages.
Yeah, it's not glamorous and it's not sexy, but you know what it is? It's real love. And I believe firmly, and I'm making fun of this romance novel here, but I firmly believe that he did have a sincere and real love in Tammy Daybell. I think she loved him and would do anything for him. And then he meets Cult Mom, and it's all over. It's all over. Because he wanted to get her in the sack. It all ended. All of these murders. Dale?
Well, there's a chemical event that happens when two people meet in like that. And it does have certain elements.
Oh, don't even start with chemical to me, because I don't know what chemicals you're talking about, but I know this. You can always say, no, I don't want to lose my husband. Yeah, I think you're handsome. So what? In 15 years, you'll be old and tired like every other husband, all right? Yeah, you might be handsome right now, but I'm going to lose my husband and my children and my life with my family over what? Some guy? Not interested. Not even a little interested. Does that not go through a man's head ever? He just sees a woman and goes, wow, that's a nice rear end. I think I'll forget about my wife for a couple of hours.
But it's the same thing we talked about before, where women's magazines are
Oh, here you go. Go ahead. Get it out of your system.
Talk about weddings and those kinds of things. And men's magazines are entirely different, and we all know what those are. And that shows the predisposition of both sexes from my perspective. And I think it's really true, but I think there has to be a level of maturity that allows you to stay with one person, because there are tremendous benefits for doing that.
You know what? The way you say that, please don't say that to your wife. There are tremendous benefits to staying with one person. Tremendous benefits, what? So she'll raise your children and clean your house and wash your socks? I'm not talking about those benefits. I'm talking about real love. And I believe Tammy Daybell loved Chad Daybell. I really do. He didn't love her, but I believe she really loved him. No woman wants to hear that you're keeping her around to take care of the children, Dale Carson. Don't go home and spout that out.
Fortunately, we're beyond all of that now.
Well, still don't say it. Still don't say it.
Okay, I won't say it. You're right.
You know what? Let me get you back in the lane to which you are accustomed. Evidence. The jury needs to hear this because it will show motive for murder on Chad Daybell's part, why he had to get rid of Tammy Daybell fortuitously right before he marries Lori Vallow in Hawaii. This is important because of the timing. It makes his motive, his frame of mind, and his course of conduct very visible, very plain. That's why I think this piece of trash romance novel needs to come into evidence. Agree or disagree?
No, I absolutely agree. And I tell you that later texts, they refer to one another using those monikers, which brings it clearly into focus for the jury. And I think it's just extraordinarily powerful.
Do you know how much it would hurt me if I read David's text, which I told you they're so boring my eyes bleed, but if I did read his text and found him texting this to somebody else, something like this, I would be devastated. Of course, I'd divorce him immediately, but I would be devastated.
But then in true
I don't think I'd have the energy to raise a gun and pull the trigger.
Well, in Georgia, of course, you could have a trial by jury that would give everything to you when he behaved that way. So let's hope he doesn't do that.
But it would just break my heart. I just wonder what Tammy Daybell knew before her death, what she really knew. I know she had suspicions because she told somebody she was suspicious, but I wonder what she really knew. That's an answer I don't think any jury will ever be able to give us. She took that information to the grave. Well, we'll wait as justice unfolds, and we wait for this romance novel to come in to evidence. And if you ever put the name Shakespeare or Lord Byron in the same breath as, what are their names, James and Elena, I will personally seek vengeance on you, Dale Carson. Bye, buddy. Thank you. Her dimensions were exactly what he always fantasized about. Wait. He once again had to fight off a powerful urge to kiss her and somehow disguise the massive erection he was experiencing. What if Tammy Daybell had read this and about his massive erection?